Microsoft and Nintendo slash prices. Steam enters the game retail business. And Germany thinks about banning Counter-Strike. These stories and many more on this episode of the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine.
I've been waiting a long time for a chance to say this. Stop the presses.
Requiescat in pace.
Makes him crazy, man. What is a man?
It's me, Mario.
What a mess.
Get over here!
Please save me.
Welcome back to the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine, the show where we travel back in time to find out what was making headlines in the video game and home computer industries. Today we're going to be traveling back 20 years to May of 2002. I'm your host Carl, and back with us is the OG co-host himself, Peter.
The OG's back.
Well. Yeah,
So I've been gone for like a couple of days, and you already forgot our intro.
Our intro? You mean asking you, Peter, say hi.
Hi.
Exactly.
Oh, I was missing that. I missed that.
Yeah, okay. So
good to be back.
It is good to have you back. You finally found some time in your very, very busy schedule for us.
Not to mention it's 11 p.m. when we're recording this. So no. I just gave up on sleeping altogether, and so we can use the night.
Excellent.
Or as Meatloaf said, come with me and seize the night.
I'm going to attribute that to Jim Steinman, actually.
Let's go with that. Jim Steinman.
There you go. Okay, so now that you're back, we need to pick up right where we left off. Exactly. And that means that we have to first do all the plugs, because everybody loves the plugs. Remember, everybody, all the links are in the show notes to all the stuff that we're going to talk about. When we are talking about May of 2002, we're always talking about cover dates of magazines and newspapers, so please keep that in mind. So obviously the news happened at some point before that. And more importantly than ever, if you have any feedback for us, our email address is videogamenewsroomtimemachine@gmail.com, easy to remember. Or you can get us on the socials at Twitter, and if I ever get around to it, updating the Instagram again. So, with that being said, we have to go to our first segment, which is, of course, our 7 Minutes in Heaven, where the co-host has to play one of the games that was reviewed in a publication dated May 2002 that they have never seen before. And while
I so miss playing your, let's say, interesting games.
Well, we had a lot to choose from. There was, and this is the problem with a May episode. It really is that sort of early summer doldrum before there's any big Christmas releases coming out. So there was a ton of crap. I mean, a metric ton of garbage in this month's list. We had Universal Studio Parks, which is notoriously one of the worst games ever. We had a whole bunch of budget titles. And that's going to be a theme, and it's going to plug in sort of with one of our major stories. Things like Mr. Mosquito, Mad Maestro, Swine. Swine a little bit less. I think that was sort of half budget. But, we could have gone with something cool like Resident Evil 0 on the GameCube or Virtua Tennis.
Who wants to see that?
No, where's the fun in that? Virtua Fighter 4. Exactly. The games that
all them
people
games
want
that
to
are
see.
actually worth playing.
Yeah, no. We decided to go for the bottom of the barrel. We went.
You decided.
Oh, I decided.
You're
right.
You're right. The bottom of the barrel. I mean, it's like you're right on the top of the barrel, looking down and be like, Peter, I can't see you down there.
Yes, and it's not because it's so deep. It's just that you're covered in so much. You know what? So, the game that I chose was Hooters Road Trip. Are you ready, Peter?
Oh, I'm so ready. Give me some boobies.
There you go.
Hi, y'all. Welcome to Georgia. How you doing, sugar? Yeah, you finished first! Woo! Yeah!
Welcome back from your 7 minutes in heaven, Peter. So, for the uninitiated who have not played Hooters Road Trip, how would you describe the game?
Well, Hooters Road Trip is a highly sophisticated drift fest.
A highly sophisticated what fest?
Drift fest.
Drift fest. Okay, yes.
Drift fest. It's a racing game. It's a racing game that somehow fits the theme of Hooters. So you're doing a tour through the United States, and every time you reach a station, a new city or whatnot, you're welcomed by the most intriguing storyline you can imagine. It's a Hooters girl saying, "Oh, you're here, awesome," or something like that. Right now, we give you some street background noises so you can feel like you're experiencing the game right now. Anywho, yeah.
Okay,
So
we're not putting those in
game.
there. We don't have those production values. We're not cutting any of that in.
Okay, too bad. No, there was a lot of street noise going on outside my window, and I thought...
okay, and I couldn't hear it, so that's good.
Oh, this is awesome. Anywho, so you're racing through from city to city. You're being greeted by a Hooters gal. The controls... it's a PlayStation 1 game, and it controls a little bit like you're constantly driving on ice. Which is supported a little bit by when you bump into traffic, there's actually no collision, no damage in this game. So you're basically auto scootering your way through the level, which really helps because you don't need no brakes. You can just ram into someone and he'll give you the right. When you do it right, you're actually accelerated towards your goal. So.
Sounds.
I think. I mean, I'm butchering the description of this marvel of a game, but
I believe that
I was a little bit speechless after you let me play this game. I was a little bit speechless because what the heck?
Now, okay, so since you haven't played it, for most of our listeners, the best way to describe this is that it is a very poor budget version of Cruisin' USA, which was an arcade game a few years earlier that was also ported to the Nintendo 64. Yeah. And it used a lot of the same techniques, so it's 3D models for the vehicles, fake names for the for cars that really exist, and a lot of flat scanned items like trees and cows that make up the background.
The cows are highly detailed. I mean, the cows are amazing.
The cows were the most impressive part of this.
The game.
Yes,
the cows were amazing. Seriously,
and now
today's games.
To put this game into a little bit of context, and the reason why I chose it is not because of its wonderful technical merits on a PlayStation 1 in 2002. I mean, just to put this into context, we're already, over a year into the PS2 and et cetera, et cetera.
No, you picked this game because of the storytelling cutscenes. I mean, and the cutscenes were pretty good, honestly.
The cutscenes, I mean,
not the content, just
the FMV quality, visuals. But it's standard PlayStation 1 FMV quality. It's nothing to write home about as far as the technical compression. It's just using the standard compression, which was really good for the time. But I mean, these essentially they just took one camcorder down to a Hooters and had each of the girls try to pretend to do an accent and stuff. It's really terrible. And if you inside the metadata of the game, there are resources left over, so you can see that this game originally didn't have the Hooters license attached to it. Had a different name.
Really?
Yeah. They basically just, at some point, got the Hooters license and threw it on there and it explains why there's no reference to Hooters at all during gameplay.
Oh yeah, this is actually what was bugging me a little bit. I mean, I expected at least some booby girls on the side of the road,
And
but there weren't any.
if you played Cruisin' USA, there was always a digitized girl in a bikini waving the flag when the start flag and the finish flag and stuff.
Not in a Hooters game, man. We are not objectifying women here.
No, of course not. That's why the loading screens are girls in bikinis. Because
Yes.
yeah,
Because we value their personality. Oh, and also the game is also a mystery game. I totally forgot that. The goal was to come in at least fifth. I came in fourth, and I lost.
Yeah,
So
and
explain that to me.
and apparently that's just bad programming because I came in third on that level and kept going. So, and you can unlock new vehicles, which is kind of cool. So there
Maybe
is
it's
some depth
weird.
to the game, but yeah, the physics on the engine, on the way the cars
They are
move
awesome.
is just ludicrously bad.
It's like kids bowling.
Yeah, bumper bowling.
Bumper. I'll never remember. That.
Yeah.
It's like bumper bowling.
Yeah,
You
definitely.
can just hold the forward button, hold the acceleration button, and let it run its course. And I'm pretty sure you're coming first.
Yeah, probably. So the game is bad. Now, in its defense, the game was sold for just $10. That was the cover price for this thing.
I actually expected it to be in a cereal box or something like that. Or it came with the special Hooters menu.
Yeah, and there is also a Windows version of this. I'm not sure how it compares. I can't imagine that it's all that good, but there is a Windows
It'll
version.
have ray tracing.
Well, I mean, no, it probably is. It's probably using the exact same code. Whether or not it supported 3D graphics accelerators is another issue entirely, but I'm guessing it would have. So it would have been the same garbage, only at a higher resolution. And
Same garbage and a high resolution. Call of Duty. Oh, I'm sorry.
hey, all those PS5 owners out there know what I'm talking about. So
the 10 of them on this
yeah,
planet?
exactly. So now and the reason I wanted to talk about this game was that we're at the end of the life cycle, or getting close to the end of the PS1's life cycle. And the fact that there's this budget software coming out, which for our European listeners, you're like, budget software? Of course, we've always had budget software. And we've talked about this a few times over the last year or so with the beginning of the Sony Classics line, where older PS2 titles that are getting massively reduced in their prices. We've seen it already on the original PlayStation as well. But this idea of original games coming out at like $10, even though they're not great games. But the fact that they're coming out at this very low price point is something new to the console market, because up until the PlayStation, we were still in cartridge land, and you could not produce a cartridge at that price. Now, this is an experiment with accessing a different aspect of the market that is not really going to catch on. Retailers are not going to buy into these. Retailers are not going to buy into these cheap games because they end up eating up just as much space as the expensive games, but just probably lead to a lot of returns. We will see similar quality games showing up, as giveaways. The infamous Burger King Xbox games, which we will probably have to talk about. Xbox 360 games, which we will talk about at some point, come to mind. But it is an interesting attempt to bring what was a successful business model on computers, and still is to a certain extent, over here. And when we do talk about the introduction of Steam as a game retailing platform as one of our stories today, that is, when we think about cheap PC games, Steam Summer Sale is going on right now. Hey, pick up this game for 99 cents. It does harken back to this moment in time when can we sell a brand new game for $10? Is how low can we go and still have a retail presence? Once we go digital, well, the floor is the bottom. It's an interesting little moment. It's an interesting experiment in the marketing of games, and that price value for money proposition, the value for money proposition that a game is supposed to be offering. It's not going to go anywhere, but I thought it was worth honoring and at least mentioning and highlighting here today. So, would you recommend Hooters Road Trip to anybody?
Yeah, but only because of the storyline.
Yeah.
I'm just picturing some grandma somewhere picking up a game because she doesn't know what game to pick. She just picked up Hooters for her grandkid. Yeah, that'll fit the scenario.
I'm just imagining the grandmother who doesn't know what Hooters are. She sees race cars on the cover.
Oh yeah.
4 computer-generated women and an owl on the top, and she's like, I have no idea, but it's pretty. And it's only $10.
Exactly this scenario.
Little Jimmy will love this. Yeah. It's
little Jimmy will.
Okay, cool. Then let's move on to our next segment where we check in with our good friend Ethan to find out what I got wrong in our April 2002 jump.
Hello, this is a prepaid collect call from
the Department of Corrections.
This call is subject to recording and monitoring. To accept charges, press 1. You may start the conversation now.
Welcome back, Ethan. So, before you tell me everything that I got wrong in our April 2002 jump, I believe it's time for
Voter's comment, which he provided himself because he messaged me on the Twitter. Uh-huh. So he made this thing that he was watching this Dutch podcast. He said the name of it was Retro Papa, but that's actually the name of the guy who runs the podcast.
And what is the name of the podcast?
Die Ridders de Retro Tafel. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, that means the Knights of the Retro Table.
Okay.
As opposed to the round
do not
table.
know any
Dutch.
So
and neither do I, but this is close enough to German that I can understand it. So it's very, very close.
You're both Deutsch.
Yeah. Or if you came to the States at a certain point in history, you were suddenly Dutch. It made it sound better.
The Pennsylvania Dutch.
Yeah, there you go.
Indeed.
Okay.
All right. Department of Corrections, we have many lines for you, and you need to check off each one, so get your pen ready.
Excellent. Hit me.
First off, Sega never developed an F-Zero game.
Okay.
You're like, it was all, the ones you were probably thinking of were the Namco developed F-Zero games, but Sega never did F-Zero.
Gotcha. Okay, for some reason I had Sega doing the F-Zero ones, but it was Namco. So, okay, cool.
Next up, talking about Sims 2. You said it was the best-selling PC game of all time to that point that you were talking about it, but it only sold 2 million copies, whereas Myst had sold 6 million copies. So it wasn't really the best-selling at that time. It does eclipse Myst eventually.
Now, is the 6 million copies of Myst only PC, so at that time DOS or Windows based, or is that also including all of the other ports of it, including the Mac?
I'm not 100% clear, but I think 6 million is PC on Myst, and then it has more than that, like 10 million overall or something like that.
Gotcha.
Because Myst sold the most on PC. It originally came out for Mac, but there wasn't a big enough install base on there.
Gotcha. Now, because it wasn't just one magazine, it was a whole bunch of magazines reprinting this news bit. So I'm wondering if there's some criteria that they're using for the measurement. Maybe, obviously Myst was packed in with virtually every CD-ROM drive for
OEM.
several years. So maybe those sales don't count as normal retail sales.
No, they do count. From reports back in the day looking at Myst, they do count.
Oh, okay.
That is sold product. I mean, especially for the manufacturers, they love that stuff because it is immediately sold product, doesn't have to go through a chain to be sold.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. And no returns. No returns.
Yes, in an OEM product, that is correct. Maybe EA was kind of doing some marketing hype stuff, but eventually, as we know, The Sims does eclipse Myst, but I just don't think it was yet.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. Makes perfect sense.
Next up, talking about the immersion rumble technology. Now, I don't know the full specifics on this. This is something I am hoping to look into at some point. But Nintendo did buy a patent license from Immersion for the GameCube and the Wii. Though, as far as we know, when they did the Rumble Pack, they did not pay anything to Immersion to do that.
For the N64.
On the N64. Yeah.
Okay. So maybe they were using a slightly different technology to pull it off?
I don't know the full specifics of this, because obviously what Immersion patent was not the idea of Rumble. Even if they had tried that, it had already been in arcade games going back to the 70s.
Yeah, exactly.
So they were never going to be able to do that. So it was the specific implementation of Rumble that they patented. So maybe the Rumble Pack didn't fall under that, and maybe Sony could have won in court against that, depending on their legal argument. But we don't know the full specifics. All we know is that Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo have all paid Immersion at some point for their technology.
Gotcha. Okay, and last but not least.
Last on the list, talking about G4, which was a channel that I would hit up back in the day. You said it was a game exclusive channel, and that's not quite right. G4 was basically like VH1, but rather than its focus being music, its focus was games. So they did show just like general nerd stuff and, films that would be interesting to that audience, but it was not all just game things. I think actually that probably throughout the entire run, that was not even half the content necessarily. Okay. And there would be, certain types of shows that they would run, tech-based shows and just nerd culture-based things that they would run as their side thing. And they had their unique programming, but it was not all game focused.
Okay. Well, that also makes sense. I mean, just doing game focused stuff all the time would have been expensive. Because you would have had to produce everything from scratch because there was nothing.
Yeah. And in that sense, G4 was innovative, but it also had the horrible late VH1 used to be. I'll just tell you, VH1 used to be real good back in the day, and then VH1 went down the MTV route of just like super sensationalist kind of things, and that kind of where G4 ended up. And that extends to the Icon series, which of course is beloved by many game history fans. But when I look back at it, I'm like, I'm not a fan of these. But I talked about that in the previous episode.
Okay. So that was it again? Almost nothing?
For April 2002? Almost nothing. I just drilled into you, and you're brushing it off like it's nothing. Well, I'm going to have to find some extra ones for next time, just so that I can eviscerate you to pieces, Mr. Carl.
Try. Okay.
You are dismissed from the Department of Corrections. We will see you next time for May 1982, and you better bring your gun.
I will do my best. Okay, Ethan. As always, thank you for your service.
So long.
So it's basically Microsoft does what Nintendo don't. You should have learned.
Well, Microsoft just, bought part of the company, so they had that.
You annoy me. I'll buy you. It's awesome.
Basically, and also what they
You're my
did
bitch
was they part of the purchase agreement, or they didn't buy the company as a whole. They bought an interest in the company. They bought some of the stock.
Microsoft was still young.
In the console business, yes.
Yeah.
But so what Microsoft did was they bought that, and then they apparently had a provision in the contract with Immersion when they bought those shares that Immersion would not settle their dispute with Sony, that they would keep fighting Sony and make Sony lose and never sell them a patent or the rights to use the patent. But they ended up doing it anyway. And then Microsoft threatened to sue Immersion because of a violation of the contract for letting Sony use the technology. It gets all really convoluted over the next couple of years. But
I'm still looking forward to that.
Oh, yeah, it's fun. I mean, when big companies are suing each other over this stuff, it's always entertaining.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, but let's be done with the mistakes of the past and begin with the mistakes of today.
Of the future.
Yes,
today.
the future. So,
2000.
Let's turn on the time machine and head back to May of 2002.
I think the sky's the limit.
2002.
The demographics are
Welcome to May of 2002. Peter,
Game Boy Advance to go online.
Startup Extra Fun wants to turn the Game Boy Advance into a web-enabled PDA. While web surfing isn't one of the options listed, email and linking up to 7 devices in a wireless network for simultaneous play is. CEO Mark Kramer, who is also an ex-NASA engineer, claims they'll deliver the cart at about the same price as a standard game cart by the autumn of 2002.
So let me get this straight. They sell a game card which enables the Game Boy Advance to connect to the internet, but not for web surfing, but for what kids usually do, writing emails and linking up to 7 devices to simultaneous play. So, but how does it work? I mean, in order to play, you need a game card, but the game card slot is already filled with a wireless card.
Well, what they're suggesting is that you're going to have these specially designed games that you're accessing over the web, downloading onto the cart, and then you're connecting to the other carts over Bluetooth.
This is something, I guess, that did not work on the Game Boy Advance.
This is something that you guessed correctly, never actually launches. I looked up the website for the company on archive.org, and those links, as always, are in the show notes. By 2005, the cart still hadn't shipped, and after that, the website just goes down.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting idea. And all the functionalities that they're talking about get realized with the DS later on. But this is an unlicensed third-party device. It's just
I'm
never
just wondering that Nintendo didn't sue those guys.
There may be a reason why the device never came out.
Oh, you mean Shadow Wars.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know what kind of legal action could happen before the device would come out. Remember, usually if you want to prevent somebody from doing something to begin with, preemptive legal action, you're going to have to prove some really horrible harm.
I think Nintendo just wrote them a letter and, they were scared from the beginning.
No, if that was the case, the website would have gone down much sooner. It wouldn't have been up for 3 more years.
Really?
Yeah, in 2005 is when the website goes down. So they wouldn't have kept trying to get this off the ground, or at least keeping a presence.
Did they collect money before the card, before they shipped the cards, or before they promised to ship the card, like a crowdfunding thing?
I'm not aware I'm not aware of any
Okay.
pre-orders. Now, it could be
Donations.
that they took them at some point. I didn't look that deeply into it.
Maybe. Giant scam. Talking about giant scams. Scams. Game Boy gets game downloader.
A company called Blaze has released the Game Downloader, a cartridge for the Game Boy and Game Boy Color that allows users to download homebrew games from their website mp3games.net.
Okay.
From your computer to the cartridge via a cable. Edge magazine checked out the offerings, and other than some knockoffs of old arcade games like Pac-Man and Breakout, there didn't seem to be much to recommend the device.
I mean, the technology surely is fascinating. However, I think that the early 2000s were the time when people were trying to make tech do stuff that tech was never designed for.
Well, it's partially that. And it's also partially this idea that, I mean, granted, the Extra Fun is a very different device. But this is very similar to what we were just talking about with Hooters Road Trip. It's this older technology. Remember, when a game console gets older, what happens to it?
Well, cheaper.
It gets passed down to the little kids, to the younger siblings.
Family.
Okay.
Yeah, true.
The price drops, and it becomes attractive to the people who don't have much money to begin with. It becomes a child's toy. So if you look at the games that are released, the first year of the PlayStation, you've got, your Wipeouts, your Battle Arena Toshindens, your Tekkens, and it's appealing to the older audience that can afford $300 out of the gate. By the time the consoles drop down to $99,
it goes to kids.
Now it's appealing to the little kids. It's a gift that you give the grandkids or something.
And back to the grandpa buying
you start.
Yeah,
exactly. You got the Game Boy Advance out. The Game Boy Color the Game Boy and Game Boy Color are staying alive because of Pokemon. They're not attracting, the hardcore, if you will. And so the idea of, hey, buy this one cart and have a ton of games. We just saw this last week with our 30-year jump when these cheap NES multi-game carts were coming out.
Yeah.
Well, they weren't cheap. They were expensive carts, but they had a whole bunch of cheap games on them. That's the philosophy that's going on here. Buy this cart, you get a whole bunch of crappy games, but you get a whole bunch of games for one price. And they're just using the technology of download them. Ooh, check back every week. There might be something new. And that would be or should be appealing to a certain segment of the market. Yeah. So it's that evolution of at what point in the retail life of the product are you?
Yeah, true that.
And speaking of retail life.
Speaking of retail life, Sega licenses ports to THQ.
Sega has cut a deal with U.S. publisher THQ to port many of its properties to the Game Boy Advance. This deal includes games like Monkey Ball, Virtua Tennis, Crazy Taxi, and will also include such quote-unquote GBA classics as Altered Beast.
Yeah, I'll think I'll take it as what it is. I mean, yeah, it is what it is.
No, well, okay, so here we have to be very, very frank about what the GBA can and can't do. So just like many other systems in the past, the GBA can be pushed to do things it's not really meant to do. So we get a very good port of Doom and Doom 2. We get a very good port of Wolfenstein. We get a couple of other first-person shooters that aren't bad. But we also get a bunch of games where people are trying to do things and the hardware just isn't up to it. One of the most notorious examples is a Star Wars game called Flight of the Falcon.
Yeah.
Which, if you've ever tried to play it, it's just not playable. Or Wing Commander Prophecy, which sort of works. The 3D kind of works for the 3D flight simulation, but don't try to port the FMV sequences of a game like that, those very long ones, into pure text. It takes forever to click through the 2 lines at a time. It's just insane.
They want you to read.
But it's one of those... It's a game that's just begging to become a 7 minutes in heaven. And here we're talking about... These are all games that are using 3D graphics. They're almost all of them started out as arcade machines. Actually, all the ones I listed are originally arcade games. So you're going to get a fairly good port of Monkey Ball on the Game Boy Advance. Very pared down, and later levels, when it gets more complicated, the frame rate really does start to suffer, but still playable. Virtua Tennis moves to sprites, also going to be passable. Crazy Taxi, on the other hand, where you need a free open city to travel around on the GBA, no, this is not going to work. And Altered Beast, which is a much older game. This was the original pack-in for the Sega Genesis in '88. This game gets a reimagining. And yes. And just like a Tim Burton reimagining, it sucks. It sucks really, really hard. And yeah, it's going to be notoriously one of the worst games. Still not as bad as things like Mortal Kombat Anthology, but it's still going to be considered one of the GBA's low points. So this THQ sub-license from Sega, I don't know why they sub-licensed it. Maybe they were like, there's no way we can make this work, but hey, the cash is good.
Sure.
I don't know why, but yeah, these games are not going to necessarily be the best use of those licenses.
But I think they made some cash, so...
Oh, definitely. I mean, if they hadn't made cash, they would have stopped producing them.
Exactly. Who doesn't like to play Altered Beast, the altered version? Speaking of low points regarding the Game Boy, Nintendo cuts price of Game Boy Advance.
After European sales begin to languish, Nintendo has decided to drop the worldwide price of the Game Boy Advance by $20 to $79.99 from $99.99. The region-free nature of the device and the fear of price cut expectations in North America and Japan have led to the worldwide price reduction, according to Nintendo.
I have problems wrapping my head around this, the explanation.
Okay. So when we're dealing with price expectations, and this is a relatively new problem in this generation of hardware. Now, remember, if we look back at the NES, for example, it launches in Japan in '83, doesn't get a North American launch until '85, and I don't think it hits Europe until '87 or '88. Yeah. So you have these massive delays. Yeah. Also, you don't get any information. Nobody knew, how much does a Famicom cost as opposed to an NES and stuff. These just weren't things that you could find out probably through an importer or something, but it wasn't something discussed in magazines. Now with the internet, the problem is when they announce that the hardware is going to cost one price in one country and another price in another country, people get outraged. Yeah. And when the prices in Europe, that $99.99 price for the GBA, was hurting sales. People just weren't picking it up in Europe the same way that they had been in other countries. Or in other territories, I should say. But they couldn't reduce it in Europe without reducing it worldwide, because everybody else would be like, wait a second, if the Europeans got a cut, and this had been a pattern that had started developing where they would cut it in one country and then you knew the cut was coming at some point, probably as soon as sales started to dip. So people would just say, you know what, I'll just wait for the price cut.
And there's the dip. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Yeah. However, I mean, on the one hand, Nintendo could have explained away the regional differences by supply chains and whatnot. And
I agree that they could have explained that probably to their shareholders, but they're not going to explain that to the teenagers who are reading the news online. And that's your problem. So if you're selling to some 14, 13, 8-year-old, and they find out on the web that, the same thing costs less in another country, they're not going to understand that, there's differences in the territories. They're just going to be angry.
yeah, but I mean, don't you have that with basically everything, that the price in different countries is different?
It used to be, and this is really something where, with the dawn of the internet, these price differences are beginning to become less and less common, especially in the realm of technology.
Yeah, right. In the console market, it is basically the same price around the globe, or well, at least the same number. The same number, not the same price. The same number, and you just switch out the currency.
Exactly. As long as the currencies are somewhat the same.
I mean, I was thinking euro and dollar.
Exactly. But this was just one of those things that, up until this point in the 90s, for example, things could be completely different prices from one place to the other.
Screw them Europeans over, or them Americans. Okay, but talking about cutting prices, Microsoft cuts price of Xbox in Europe.
On April 26th, the pretty exorbitant Xbox launch price of €479 will be dropped by
not bad.
€299. The massive drop just months after launch is no small part due to the negative reaction to the price and to equal the price of the system's main rival, the PS2. Microsoft has promised to give those that bought the console before the price reduction compensation in the form of a controller and 2 games.
Help me out a little quick. When was the launch of the Xbox?
The European launch of the Xbox, I want to say, is in February.
Okay. So now, this is enough. So now it makes sense that they want to give customers something back.
Oh, yeah, because they would have a mutiny on their hands. Plus, you have a lot of European countries, like in Germany, where you have a legal right to return stuff within a certain period of time. And that period of time is quite long. You could have had a lot of people returning their consoles and then immediately walking out with the cheaper box.
Okay, I want to return this one, and I'll take it right away with me. I didn't even deinstall my games. Let's just go with
Exactly.
Interesting. I mean, Microsoft really, they weren't the masters of marketing their Xboxes, weren't they? I mean, when I think of the Kinect story of the Xbox One.
Well, that's the 360. The Kinect comes in with the 360.
Yeah, but the Kinect only, or the Kinect, well, that you were forced to use Kinect came with the Xbox One.
Yeah. And that was one of those things where, and remember, every time you're introducing a new technology, whether or not it's going to catch on is always a gamble.
Yeah.
Look at the Wii.
Yeah.
Those controllers, it seemed like a great idea, but I remember playing with one. I got to play briefly one of the demo units in New York City at Rockefeller Center. Before it launched. They had set up this a whole bunch of machines at Rockefeller Center that you could play. So I got to demo it there. And I remember thinking, okay, this is really, really cool, but am I really going to play a game for more than half an hour with these controls moving my arms around? No. I thought this thing is basically going to be an interesting little side note, and then it's immediately going to die. Obviously, I was wrong because the Wii sold really, really well.
Yeah, but I mean, your hands, they are like toilet seats in size. So,
listen, it had nothing to do with that. It had to do with the fact that if you're playing a longer form game, especially like an RPG or action adventure game like a Zelda, you can't be sitting there waving your hands around for half an hour. Your arms are going to get tired. It's not going to be a relaxing experience. It's just not going to be, and you're also going to start losing your reaction ability. You're not going to be swinging the same way each time. And it turned out that I was right on that regard, that the long-form games on the Wii used the controller, the motion control, but used it very sparingly.
Yeah.
So you didn't move your character around the world that way. You didn't choose your dialogue options that way, but you would do it for basically mini games inside the game.
Mm-hmm.
And the more casual games that you would only play for, let's say, 10, 15 minutes at a time, those, like Wii Sports, those did use them almost exclusively.
Oh, yeah.
So, in that sense, I kind of got it right, but at the same time, it's a gamble each time. If people had adopted and bought into the idea of Kinect, it would have put Microsoft ahead.
Dude, yeah, of course. But
I'm going to correct myself. It wasn't February. They launched in March of 2002, so March 14th.
Well, yeah, okay, then it totally makes sense.
So it's a little more than a month later that they're dropping the price.
Yeah, makes sense. But as it is, it's always the same. Software sells hardware, and if you don't have the right software for the Kinect, which they didn't, and they didn't develop it either, that's it.
Well, that's true too. I mean, what would have been the killer app for the Kinect?
Well, a Star Wars game, I guess.
Yeah, a Star Wars dancing game.
A Star Wars dancing game, exactly. Han Solo, M has a Han Solo. Speaking about Star Wars, Xbox has the Force. Yeah, of course I went there.
Nice transition. I like it. Yeah. I like it.
It was a setup for 10 minutes.
I'm sure that our listeners greatly appreciated that as they fell asleep. Okay. On April 26th, I'm reading the wrong story. Microsoft has announced that BioWare's upcoming Star Wars RPG, Knights of the Old Republic, will appear first on the Xbox before appearing later on the PC.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Kinect is still in the future. But yeah, so Knights of the Old Republic becomes one of the two big killer apps for the Xbox at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got Halo, and now they've got this. And it is it's a motivator for a lot of people to jump on board the system. We're going to get Morrowind a little bit later. That's also going to be another one. And both of these games essentially are living off the fact that there's a hard drive installed in the system that the PlayStation just does not have. Or the PS2, I should say.
Microsoft does what PlayStation don't. That don't sound good. That don't sound cool.
Yeah.
Okay, dude, you know what? Let's move on and leave the console business.
Sort of.
Games? Sort of. Yeah, sort of course. Games Developer Conference subdued.
With all three of the next-gen consoles now out, and developers deep in the task of getting to grips with the systems, the Games Developers Conference was a far more subdued affair than in prior years. Less talk of what could come in the future, more making it happen. Both Microsoft and Sony were trying to woo developers, Microsoft by enticing them to expand their use of textures and sound to fully utilize the Xbox, while Sony was pushing their soon-to-be-released Linux for PS2. Middleware companies seem to be teaming up to create synergies. Mobile gaming looked to be making inroads in the US, as many of the presentations at the conference were about this still underdeveloped segment of the US market.
I really like that with this console generation, developers were trying to get to grips with the systems, and with today's console generation, consumers are trying to get their grips on the system. Yeah.
Oh, so clever of you there.
Oh yeah. You know, it's the wordplay. I use my time off in order to work on my wordplay.
Well, and it is interesting because unlike the consoles today, you actually have different CPUs and GPUs in each of the systems. Imagine that.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, the difference in the systems surely was a pain in the butt for the developers. Quick question though: Linux for PS2?
Yeah. This is something we've covered a couple times over the last few months. Because Sony is trying to find additional uses for the PS2. Remember, it's got a DVD player in it, and a lot of people are buying the system just for the DVD player. And so now they've been pushing this idea that add a keyboard to it. They launched a printer as well, and you can run Linux on your PS2 and turn it into a very cost-efficient workstation. That's the idea. Okay. Now, the interesting thing about GDC is it does bring everybody together to talk about big topics and where they think the industry is going, presenting new ideas, etc., etc. And this new generation of hardware, as we said, very, very different. Each, the GameCube, the Xbox, and the PS2 have very, very different architectures. So developing for those systems is more difficult. And we have the burgeoning idea of online. Online play has been around for a while, but online commerce and so forth, which is going to be the driver of cell phone games. And we talked a few months ago already about how color displayed cell phones are really starting to take off in Japan. The Europeans have unified their systems, and in Europe, cell phone gaming is taking off as well. In the United States, you still have a very fragmented market, so it's going to take a little bit longer for that to consolidate enough for these markets to develop. But think about it, you're going to have to sell those games digitally. That's going to be the forerunner in many regards of the digital sale of games. And the other interesting thing here at GDC, and we'll talk, there's one more big news story coming out of GDC in just a moment, but the other big thing is that the middleware companies are starting to consolidate. So you have several middleware companies either announcing or showing up for the first time as parts of other bigger companies. And the middleware becoming this essential aspect of the industry where it's no longer, okay, I'm going to buy the Quake engine or whatever, but you're buying a whole bunch of little components and then mixing and matching them. But at the same time, the people making the middleware are getting consumed by bigger companies, creating larger packages of software development tools. That is, I think, also something that is going to make those cheaper online downloadable games more possible, because it's going to make the development faster. It's going to standardize a lot of stuff. It's going to help make less professional developers viable because they're going to be able to just buy the middleware as opposed to have large teams developing tools from scratch. And at the same time, if they have an online distribution platform to actually make money off of their games without having to go through the more expensive physical retail distribution networks, then you're going to see a real shift in the way that games are made and marketed. And that brings us to another big announcement at GDC.
About digital publishing platforms. Steam starts selling games.
Valve has launched their Steam service that will sell digital copies of games to consumers. Currently, they are offering a free beta of Counter-Strike 1.4 with more games planned as paid downloads in the future, including Counter-Strike Condition Zero, amongst others. German magazine PC Games has an editorial this month about Valve's new online games selling service. While downloading a legal digital copy of a game seems very appealing, as it helps fight piracy and makes acquisition of legitimate games without having to add the cost of manufacturing copies, warehousing, and retail possible, they caution that the loss of those industries could be devastating to the industry as a whole, and the digital retailing of movies and music have had a hard go of it in the past.
I really like how those video game magazines always see change as something terrible. Well, not always. I'm just thinking of another editorial a couple of, well, actually a year ago.
Which editorial was that?
The one that the console market is destroying the PC market.
Oh, yeah. The PC master race being a bunch of whiny bitches. Yeah.
Yep.
As somebody who's only owned a couple of consoles in his life, I shouldn't say that. But, yeah. Well, the thing here is they're not completely wrong for a couple of reasons. If you look at any of the computer game magazines at this point in time, you have, of course, the big ads at the front of the magazine, which are put there by game publishers to advertise individual titles, like the 2-page spreads for Dungeon Siege or whatever. But if you get to the second half of the magazine, what you start to find is a ton of ads from retailers. Be it mail order retailers or small or retail chains, Amazon's putting ads in these magazines saying, you can buy the physical games off of us and so forth. If there's only one online retailer or the retailers are online, that might be a pretty serious blow to the revenue of these magazines.
Of course.
As we've seen. These magazines start to dwindle in their availability. The other problem is also, there's a lot of people employed by, the people putting the boxes together, people printing the DVDs and so forth. Obviously, hey, who still needs a buggy whip maker in every town is the same question here. And that's reference to the movie Other People's Money. In case you haven't seen it, awesome Danny DeVito flick. Go check it out. If you want to, it's basically Pretty Woman, but funnier. And in many regards, it doesn't have the prostitute angle to it, but it's every other aspect of that story with the hostile takeovers of businesses and stuff. It's really, really good.
Okay.
Other People's Money.
Noticed.
And now, so Steam, of course, is coming out of the gate not as, the premier retail place for all game publishers, but it's interesting that they're launching it at GDC. It's immediately up online, and it's going to take a while to take off, because they're describing it as a way to download only part of the game at a time. Remember, we're still at the point where most people don't have high-speed internet connections at home, and if you do have a high-speed,
especially not in Germany,
it's not a meg a second yet. Okay, so what they're talking about is hardcore gamers are averaging 512 kpbs as a connection speed. And so what the system is supposed to do is it only downloads as much as it needs to play, and then it downloads the next chunk when it needs to play it.
Yeah. Open world games weren't that popular yet.
Yeah. But also it's interesting that ATI and NVIDIA have already signed up and pledged to support the system so that updates for the drivers and stuff will come through the system automatically. Yeah. Obviously, companies make those kind of promises all the time. There were supposedly 100 developers who signed up to make games for the Jaguar, and we all know how that turned out. But, it is interesting, and Valve is a well enough known commodity because of Half-Life at this point that, it has that legitimacy to it. And one final bit here, Gabe Newell, co-founder of Valve, or founder, I can't remember if he's founder or co-founder. He estimates that they will raise their portion of a normal $40 retail sale price from under $10 to $30. And this is the other key. By getting rid of all the manufacturing costs, by getting rid of the distributors, by getting rid of the retailers, normally they would get only $10 off of selling a $40 game. And he's estimating that that will actually rise to $30 off of a $10 game. And if you look at it today, I don't know exactly how much Steam gets per game sold, but it is a small fraction of what companies used to have to lose in the old distributions network. So it's pretty cool in that regard.
Okay.
Yeah. And that German editorial talking about how the digital distribution of movies had failed in the past. Well, that was a movie download is typically bigger than the typical game download at this point in time. And also, watching a movie in front of your computer wasn't the ideal setting. You needed to have it on the big screen. With computer games, you're expected to play your game in front of a computer.
It was way too early for video streaming.
Yeah, I mean, there had been a few attempts at it, but for the most part, it didn't work yet. And music, well, digital distribution of music was already very successful in the sense that it distributed a lot of music. It just didn't generate a lot of income because everybody had MP3s, but nobody was paying anything for them. And so for both movies and music, the media as service model became the dominant one once everybody had enough of a strong enough internet connection to do streaming. Right. So it was going to come, it's just hadn't happened yet.
Exactly. Such as reliable game streaming right now. Okay, but moving on, Sim sales numbers confirmation.
So last month we talked about The Sims breaking worldwide sales records for PC software, but weren't sure if that included add-ons or not. This month's PC Games magazine confirms that the 6 million mark has been broken just for the base game, with the already released add-ons expanding the sales figure to over 12 million.
This is a juggernaut, but I think we shall move on. German authorities consider Counter-Strike ban.
Yes, the German authority in charge of banning the sale of youth-endangering media has announced that they will take public comments about the game into account before deciding if the game should end up on the dreaded index of games that can't be publicly promoted or openly displayed at retail, an effective commercial ban on the products. This unusual action was taken due to the online-only nature of the game, which may contribute to social communication between players and thus mitigate the... Yeah, stop laughing, okay? I know what you're laughing about. This is serious. Serious. Please control yourself. So, the unusual action was taken due to the online-only nature of the game, which may contribute to social communication between players and thus mitigate the negative effects of the otherwise violent actions taken in the game.
Yeah. I like their faith in people. I really like that.
Yeah. They had not seen Master Chief teabagging anybody yet.
Nope.
And they hadn't apparently been aware of the fact that, people are racist bastards when they're playing games. But
yeah, true that.
Yeah, and it's a weird thing that they're doing this because on the one hand, the index of materials that cannot be sold. And there's still a lot of games on there. Some games are just now graduating out because after, I think, 20 years or 30 years or 25 years, whatever it is, you're allowed to get off the list. Wolfenstein 3D just came off the list and can be sold again. But they will not. They will end up deciding not to add Counter-Strike to the list. And it's not because it's not violent, but because of this online nature that, people are interacting with others and so forth.
Yeah, of course.
The weird thing here is that their decision is going to come out right after. I mean, I think it's like a week or two after the notorious Erfurt school shooting. So this is basically the as far as I know, the only big school shooting in Germany in German history. And it's a 19-year-old who was an avid Counter-Strike player. And he goes off and shoots up the school, kills 16 people.
Yeah.
Before taking his own life. This happens in April of 2002. So obviously, remember I said at the beginning, it's a May issue, but obviously talking about stuff that happened before. So while they're still taking these messages, or after they've taken the public input and then ended it, but they still haven't released the decision, the Erfurt thing happens. And I found several editorials. I linked to one from the Spiegel magazine, where they're talking about how could it be that Counter-Strike isn't being banned while it could have been a contributing factor to this. And the agency takes a very mature look at it. They're like, we based our decision on the evidence that we gathered. Yeah. And a single incident, should not suddenly be the arbiter of what, the standard is. So they don't ban CS. And their entire status here is going to begin to deteriorate rather quickly. So we're going to get to the point where, GTA 5 doesn't get banned, for example, and things like this.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a few more years before the index stops having its big, powerful weight on it. But this is one of those weird, sad incidents where an actual tragedy happens. You could connect it to that, but the government agencies don't panic about it, and instead really do see the cooperative nature of the whole situation as a social positive. Now, we also have to be very clear here at this point in time in Germany, internet connections are poor at best for the most part. Their distribution is poor, but what is huge in Germany at this time, and there's actually a report in another magazine this month, are these giant LAN parties, local area network parties, where they will literally have 200 people in a giant gymnasium for 3 days just playing. Everybody brings their own PC and they just sit down and they're playing these games with one another. And there are no
air in such a place after day one?
That is an excellent question. I do not know the answer to. But I do know that, these people were having a good time. These were typically somewhat geekier people. Most of them are guys, unfortunately. And they're just, having a good time, socializing. It's a way to interact with others. And I think that if I had to speculate, I'd say that was probably one of the core reasons. And they're not looking at the online, they're looking at these LAN parties primarily.
Yeah, most likely, because online is a thing of the future. In 2002 in Germany.
In Germany, yes. Whereas
Netflix is growing by leaps and bounds.
Not directly gaming related, but there is a fun mention in this month's Computer Gaming World about how the flat fee, no late fees DVD rent by mail service has caught on in the magazine's offices. The large-scale adoption of DVD players as both standalone devices and as PS2s in Christmas of 2001 has electrified the company's revenues.
Oh man, even in 2011, Netflix for me, when I was in the States, Netflix for me was this was an epiphany that something like this could exist.
Yeah, the send it by mail, have it picked up at your house in the mailbox. That alone.
I'm talking about the digital Netflix, but yeah, I know they sent DVDs around earlier.
Well, and 2011, I was still doing the mail order DVDs because, number one, the selection of stuff that you got on streaming wasn't all that great, and you also didn't get the bonus materials. So I always considered the DVDs for me were still the primary source back then.
Yeah, Yeah, no, but yeah, well, DVD mail order, whatever. But streaming in 2011, dude, future and stuff. And what did I watch? Archer.
Hey,
Oh well.
I can't say that was a bad thing. Still one of the best shows ever. I mean, come on.
Oh yeah.
Awesome stuff. I still have to finish watching the final season. I've got like 4 episodes left, and I kind of can't bring myself to watch the end of it because then it's over.
It's going to be over.
That's the thing. I hate it when a show is over. I mean, I gotta bring myself to do it. But yeah, so it's interesting to see that we have this future player in the streaming business. This is when they start to catch on. You needed to have enough people who were using DVD players. The company's been around since the late 90s, and it almost went bust once when the .com bubble burst.
Yeah.
But it managed to survive. It's one of those survivors, and it's now just really a question of having a mass market of DVD owners who also don't want to have to be buying DVDs all the time and just need new content for their devices.
Speaking about designated survivors, the Angel of Darkness is previewed.
Nice one, Designated Survivor. Well, this one it won't be that. We don't often talk about game previews on the show, but one notable game got previewed in a variety of mags this month, and that was Lara Croft Tomb Raider: Angel of Darkness. The much-anticipated next-gen Lara is being touted by the publisher as being a massive change with the addition of RPG elements, a dynamic story, and a darker tone. How will it play? Well, that's not being revealed as no one has gotten any hands-on time with it yet. Now, do you know anything about this entry in the Tomb Raider series?
I know it exists, and by the time I wasn't that big of a Tomb Raider fan.
Okay. Well, I mean,
today I'm not
Tomb Raider was obviously one of the premier titles in the previous generation, originally released on the Sega Saturn, then came over to the PlayStation, and had, I think, 4 games on the PlayStation. At this point, there'd already been a Game Boy Color game, and I can't remember how many other little spin-offs.
Yep, and ladies everywhere.
Exactly, oversaturation of the Lara character, but the gameplay had grown stale at this point, and everybody wanted to see what will Lara Croft look like in the next generation. And this is going to become, this is going to be a fiasco of epic proportions. The game's not going to be done. The game is going to disappoint. It's not going to work on virtually every level. It's essentially going to kill Core Design, the company that originally developed Tomb Raider and had been around for forever. And the IP, and we've talked about this the last few months, how Eidos is really hurting for cash. How basically everything that they've tried that wasn't Tomb Raider hasn't really performed the way they wanted it to. And the moment Angel of Darkness underperforms, it's game over.
It's basically a A2 Brute moment.
That's a nice way of putting it. It really is. When Angel of Darkness doesn't work, they don't know where to go anymore. And so, it's not going to be an immediate.
So looking forward to
It's not going to be an immediate death, but it will be a death.
All right, and talking about death, Software 2000 is no more.
German management game giant Software 2000 or Software 2000, founded by brothers Andreas and Mark Wadinger, has filed for bankruptcy. All of the company's assets, including their biggest IPs such as Bundesliga Manager Professional, Christopher Columbus, and Pizza Connection, also known as Pizza Tycoon in the US, will be sold off by the court.
Bye-bye, Software 2000.
Yeah, I'm guessing this was all before your time. You never got to play a Software 2000 game.
I mean, I was born by 2002 for quite a while, but yeah, I've never played one of them Software 2000.
Yeah, they were very, very big in the early to mid 90s, especially in this area of strategy management games. That was their bread and butter.
Okay.
So Christopher Columbus, for example, was a game where you had to organize expeditions to the New World, trade, and move stuff around between European big cities. Basically some nice graphics, but it was all just a numbers game underneath. Pizza Tycoon was similar, where you had to open up a pizzeria and keep the mob off your back, but it also, you could develop new pizza recipes, so you had all the ingredients and you actually built the pizzas, and if you had the right combination of ingredients for the right customers, it would become a big seller, things like this. But again, lots and lots of number heavy strategy titles, which, especially in the early 90s, when the German government was very, very adamant and going after violent games, these guys had a real niche in that market. Most of the games never made it outside of the German-speaking countries, but inside those countries, these guys made really good progress until, just for whatever reason, everything just seems to stop. And a couple of years go by where they produce almost nothing. Then they release a couple of updates to their Bundesliga Manager game that are buggy as hell and incomplete and don't work right. And then the company just kind of disappears. And now they've declared bankruptcy, and that's the end of that. It's kind of sad, because there is this niche for this kind of strategy game that none of the other big publishers really seem to be filling at this point in time. And I think that had they been able to keep going for just a little bit longer, they're the kind of software producer that could have done well on digital platforms, because they could have gotten outside of Germany. They could have reached that audience that they weren't big enough to reach in a retail way. So, for example, their biggest international success was Pizza Tycoon, or Pizza Connection as it was originally called, and that got released in North America by Microprose with the renamed Pizza Tycoon title. So I really think that they could have done a lot more. It's kind of sad that they're gone, because I do remember some of their games very, very fondly.
But, well, this is how it is. Every company at some point has to go the way of the devil.
Every country's got to go the way of the country. Yeah,
country.
Every company.
Well.
Oh, Jesus,
Lord!
yeah.
Oh, Lord! This got rather dark and political.
A little
right
Freudian slip.
Dude, you know what? We should wrap it up. We should wrap it up before we are talking about stuff.
Exactly. Before we get into the depressing stuff. So, Peter, one last order of business. What is the word of the episode?
Price cutting.
Price cutting. Not a word, 2 words, but
no,
I dig it.
Yeah, but I've been gone for a while, and I need to,
Price cutting. I totally dig it. Yeah. Okay, everybody, thank you for sticking with us all the way to the end. If you are hearing this, remember, if you want to watch the video version of the 7 Minutes in Heaven, become a Patreon patron for just $1 a month. You get the video versions. You get early access to our interviews. It's good stuff. And if you do have any comments for us, want to tell us how great we're doing, give us a 5-star review in whatever app you're using or website you're using to listen to us.
All of them.
And if you want to tell us how great we're doing or how terrible we are, or have a question for us, just send us an email, okay? With that being said, have fun.
Bye.
Woohoo!